The Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer has taken the world by storm, and we are here to dissect it and discuss it on this edition of Geekville Radio.
Geekville Radio.
Welcome once again, citizens of Geekville. This is Seth, a.k.a. Zandrax, the mayor of Geekville and the host of Geekville Radio, which now is officially on YouTube. To say this trailer took the world by storm, that might even be a bit of an understatement, because I think the stat was something like 60 million views over all the forms of social media, not just one YouTube page. Marvel put it on their YouTube page, Sony, I think I saw it in the Entertainment Tonight YouTube page, then you add that with all the Facebook and Twitter, X, and however many other social media channels out there. But still, that's a lot of viewership. So this is easily going to be one of the most anticipated films of the year, possibly second only to Avengers Doomsday. Now, I'm going to start off here with some of my immediate thoughts, kind of knee-jerk thoughts on what I saw, and then we'll go into the screen caps and go a little bit more in-depth. Now, first off, I'm really excited that they are going back to that grounded real-world style that honestly works the best for Spider-Man. When he's a street-level hero swinging around the streets of New York, I think that's when the character shines in a world where you feel like he might actually could exist in the real world. And the suit, I love the suit. It's as comic book accurate as we've ever seen. I've never really cared for the tech suits that he had in the first two movies. But this looks like it's just the good old-fashioned spandex that he puts on and uses in the wash, as we see in the trailer as well. And I also like that Punisher and Bruce Banner are in this. It's adding some dynamics. It's helped keeping things fluent, because we really didn't get that many crossovers or cameos of other characters in these recent phases of the Marvel MCU, but we are getting them now, and those are some pretty heavy hitters. Now, the first thing we see is Peter with his mask up watching MJ and Ned on his phone, and they're going to MIT. And this is one of those moments where you compromise the comic book aspect from the movie crowd, because I don't think a current day superhero would take his mask off outside, or at least show his face when he's outside, especially in New York. Everybody's got a cell phone. Everybody's got some sort of digital device. There's security cams all over the place and satellites and all that jazz. Somebody somewhere would have noticed this pic of Spider-Man sitting upside down on some building and say, oh crap, we got to look at his face here. But that's a mild complaint, because, like I said, the comic can get away with the hero having his mask on 98% of the time. In a movie, actors need to act, and the character probably would not be taking their masks or helmets off. Well, unless they're Carl Urban and Judge Dredd. So major props for Carl Urban being as accurate as he could with Dredd. But that's neither here nor there. It's a nitpick. They do it for the movie audience. They don't do it for the comic audience. The bigger deal to me, and this is getting into Peter's character here, the bigger deal to me is that this is a few years after No Way Home. And these years later, Peter is still stalking his friends who don't know him. Now, doing what he did, having Doctor Strange erase people's memories of who he is, that is a pretty selfless act. And Peter is a very selfless person, but I'm not sold on him basically stalking his friends years later. I think he would have come to terms with that by now. If this was a few months later, sure, okay, yeah, the heartbreak and all that. But if we're talking 3-4 years later, I think Peter would have sucked it up by now and just embraced his new life. Now then, Spidey jumps off, swings into action. We get a close-up of Peter's eyes under the suit. And again, this is another nitpick, because, like I said, I wasn't too keen on the tech suits. That close-up, behind the mask look of an actor's face like we would see in Iron Man, that works for Iron Man, because it's an armored suit. But Spidey's suit is skin-tight spandex. There wouldn't be any space between his eyes and the mask. So otherwise, his head would look huge. Look at me, I've got a big head. My head is huge, as Space Ghost would say. This doesn't look to be the Stark design tech suit that he had in earlier movies, like I said. But again, personal preference, nitpick, call it what you want. Now, we do hear the internal monologue that we'd gotten in previous films, something that was done very well in Sam Raimi's movies with Tobey Maguire. And I think it's good for the viewers. We get it in the comics all the time. So many comics, you have that internal monologue of what's going through the heroes' minds or even the villains' minds as they do what they do. We do see Spider-Man getting the key to the city, which of course is a ceremonial thing. It's not an actual key that opens anything, because boy, that would be a heck of a key lock. But this seems to show when the movie takes place, given the absence of some pretty important people. More on that later. We see some quick shots of Spidey dodging fire from some sort of armored military transport, and he's thrown against a Ford SUV, damaging it. Could you imagine trying to explain that to your insurance? Oh man, Spider-Man hit my car. Wait, you hit Spider-Man with your car? No, Spider-Man hit my car. Just flew into it. I don't know how well that conversation with your insurance company would go. But in what is perhaps the funniest exchange in the trailer, Punisher, yes, the Punisher, hits Peter with his van. And there's Peter clinging onto the front of the van, screaming at him. And Peter clearly calls him Frank. So he knows Frank Castle is the Punisher. And Punisher just pulls out what looks like a grenade launcher. I doubt the van would be able to take a point-blank grenade explosion like that. So it might have been some sort of non-lethal force weapon, which punts Spidey off of the van and onto that before-mentioned military vehicle. And Spidey responds by knocking Frank out of his van. We see more scenes of Peter stalking MJ. We see MJ with Iman Esfandi. I hope I said that name correctly. He is only credited in this movie as being MJ's boyfriend, but you may recall that he was Ezra Bridger in the Ahsoka series. Now here, I think this is where we're getting the secondary plot of the film, because Spidey is going through some sort of transformation. It looks like there is organic webbing cocooning around him, because remember, Spider-Man's webs are not organic. He has web shooters. That's something he created. But here he is getting encased, almost cocooned into webbing like he is mutating. Now, more on that later. We see him talking to Dr. Bruce Banner, and we see him getting some sort of body scan where we might learn what is happening to his physiology. And Bruce even mentions mutating. Now, I think they're using Bruce for a specific reason in this movie. Again, more on that later. We do see a shot of Aunt May's grave, showing that her death was in 2024. Now, this movie does take place 4 years after No Way Home. That would mean this movie's taking place in circa 2028, possibly 2029. That's just trivial. I don't think that means anything in particular. We do see here what looks to be a close-up of a woman's hands strapped to a chair. As far as who this is, yeah, more on that later. We get a huge explosion of what I'm assuming is that military craft from earlier smashing into a building. We see Spidey run up to it. He opens the hatch, ready to grab whoever villain he believes is going to be piloting this thing. And then we see this normal middle-aged woman in street clothes. And this is what I think the A plot is, which is somehow people are getting mind controlled. We don't know why, we don't know where, we don't know who at this point. But clearly there is mind control going on, because you see her expression. And again, more on that later. We see actor Tremel Tillman. I hope I'm saying that correctly. He looks to be playing somebody of importance, but IMDb does not list who he is playing. We get a shot of some hooded villain from behind, and we finally get some confirmation on actual villains. We do see Scorpion. We saw him in the first movie, Homecoming. And we see a shot of MJ and Spidey. I think we all know that MJ probably knows who Spider-Man is. She just doesn't know that it's Peter. I will throw it out here, though, that MJ already figured out who he was in the previous films before he admitted to her. So we may get a repeat of that. We may have MJ figure out who he is before the movie's done, and he may not have to reveal to it or have whatever custom magic undone. And we see this cool shot of Spidey using his webbing to force that armored vehicle out of harm's way. And in one of the coolest spots in the trailer, this right here. This is, of course, a tribute to the Amazing Fantasy comic, which was Spider-Man's first ever appearance. That was an anthology comic that Stan Lee participated in when he was only a writer for Marvel, long before he became the publisher. He originally put in this throwaway story of Spider-Man, and it turned out to be so popular that he wound up writing Spider-Man as a regular title after that. Now, we also see what looks to be Boomerang, not Captain Boomerang. It's a DC hero. I guess Marvel doesn't give their Boomerang guys rankings. And we also see this guy sliding along here. It looks to be Tarantula. And in one of the final action shots here, we get him fighting the Hand in a prison and over the buildings of New York City. And now here we've reached the later part of the show that I've been teasing for the last 10 minutes or so now. First, let's talk about that opening shot of Spidey receiving the key to the city. Now, if you've been following Daredevil Born Again, this is actually something pretty significant because in that series, Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin, was elected mayor of New York City and has a strict no-tolerance policy for vigilantes. So this scene tells us that we are either looking at events from before the Born Again series, or this will be happening after season 2. Because the fact that Spider-Man is being celebrated suggests that Kingpin probably isn't the mayor anymore, because he absolutely would classify Spidey as a vigilante. I think he even mentioned it in the first season of Born Again. My hunch is this is taking place after Born Again wraps up. Kingpin is likely behind bars once again, and New York's new leadership is embracing superheroes once again. Now, I talked about that mutation storyline. There's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot that this could be referencing here. I'm not a big fan of mutating characters or characters that change only to go back, but this is comics. It happens all the time. And I'm convinced that we're getting Man-Spider. And there are at least 3 ways that they could go with this. The earliest version, they didn't call him Man-Spider, but the earliest version of this comes from Stan Lee himself. In the 1970s, he wrote a story called The Six-Arm Saga. In that story, Peter grows 4 extra arms. And I don't think the average person would like to run around with 6 arms. And he desperately seeks the help from his professor, Kirk Connors, who also is the alter ego of the Lizard. Now, while a lot of people liked the story back in the day, I think this is the least likely inspiration for the film, basically because it's just Peter with 4 extra arms. There's the Marvel Fanfare story from the 1980s. Now, Marvel Fanfare was an anthology series that featured standalone stories outside of Marvel's normal continuity. And the very first story was by Chris Claremont, one of the guys responsible for getting me into comics when I was a kid. And in that one, Spider-Man and I think it's Angel from the X-Men traveled to the Savage Land. And in that, Peter got mutated. He grew the extra limbs, grew extra eyes, basically becoming more spider than man, hence why the nickname Man-Spider. And that is also interesting, but it might not be the main source. What's the most likely inspiration? I think the most seen or most remembered version of Man-Spider is from season 2 of the 90s Spider-Man animated series called Neogenic Nightmare. And it was a 14-episode storyline. Yes, you heard that. 14 episodes in this storyline, which is in those days like an eternity. But they did that a lot in the 90s with the Marvel animated stuff. I think the Phoenix Saga for the X-Men series was, I want to say, 7 parts. And what makes this particularly relevant is that series also crossed over with the X-Men animated series with the same voice actors and the guest starred the Punisher. So given that the Punisher, we already know, is in this movie, and there's Marvel mutants rumored to appear, I don't think that's a coincidence at all. I think that they're being inspired by this Neogenic Nightmare arc from the animated series. Now, let's talk about the big guy, Mark Ruffalo, returning as the Hulk. On the surface, they just might be using Bruce to keep things streamlined, avoiding introducing too many characters that the general audience might not know, because they really haven't done much with Kirk Connors or Lizard. And from my memory of reading comics when I was a kid, Spidey hung around more with Reed Richards than he did with Bruce, because Fantastic Four always were based out of New York. But they're probably just using, again, Bruce to keep things simple. Now, there could be something deeper going on here, though, as to why they're using Bruce Banner. Remember, it was Doctor Strange's magic that erased everybody's memories of Peter Parker being Spider-Man at the end of No Way Home. But Bruce Banner himself has an alter ego, of course, the Hulk. So here's the theory. Banner keeps the Hulk suppressed most of the time. So it's possible that since the Hulk was dormant when the spell was cast, it didn't affect Hulk's memory. So if Banner transforms into the Hulk in this movie, the Hulk might actually remember that Spider-Man is Peter Parker, and thus Bruce might remember. Because it seems like Banner doesn't recognize him at first. You clearly hear him say, what's your name again? And it's also possible that No Way Home's events occurred simultaneously with the She-Hulk series. And in the She-Hulk series, Bruce blasted off into space. Maybe Doctor Strange's spell only affected people physically on Earth. Now, why would he not recognize Peter? We don't know. He could be smart enough to kind of play along, and maybe when they get into a private area, he can say, yeah, I actually do know who you are. But we'll see. I don't think that's the only scene where we're going to see Bruce Banner. I think he's going to come into play in the climax of the movie. Now, about that mysterious woman bound to the chair in the trailer, this seems connected to the armored transport we see multiple times. Purely my guess. Someone is controlling minds. When Spidey finds this woman in the vehicle, we hear a whoosh, and suddenly one of these government agents, his expression changes dramatically. And I think you see it also whoosh up to somebody else in like a catwalk or something. We also see a close-up of somebody's eyes, presumably Peter's, turning completely black, much like what happened with Hawkeye in the first Avengers film where Loki took control of him. So who's behind this mind control? Well, we know that Sadie Sink from Stranger Things fame is in the film. Fan speculation suggests that she could be playing Jean Grey because Hardy has red hair. Jean Grey was, of course, previously portrayed by Famke Janssen in the original X-Men trilogy. She could be held against her will because this would be a new variant of Jean Grey that we haven't seen yet. And the X-Men were always tended to be brought in as kids, college-age students. So we could find that Jean Grey is being held against her will in some capacity and forced to do these mind controls to do somebody else's dirty work. I could be completely off base on that. There could be something else going on in here. Hey, there's people that think there's a variant of Scarlet Witch out there for Doomsday. She can control minds too. Just throwing that out there. But at this point, I think that's probably like maybe a 2% chance that it's Scarlet Witch. I don't think we're going to see her till Doomsday. I do think she will be in Doomsday. Actually, I'd be surprised if she's not in Doomsday. But anyway, as for the other villains we see, we get a glimpse of Scorpion coming back from the Homecoming movie. We see Boomerang, like I said, and Tarantula. I think these are early film appearances, probably before that big action scene with the armored vehicle. This could be part of a montage, catching the audience up on what Spider-Man has been doing over the last 4 years since his identity was erased. Because quite frankly, I don't think the average moviegoer is going to see a guy named Boomerang as any big threat to Spider-Man. So seeing him be defeated rather easily by Spider-Man, I think that's what we're in store for. Now, finally, the last action sequences we see in this trailer involve the Hand. This is the deadly criminal martial arts organization heavily tied to Daredevil's history. I want to say Frank Miller created the Hang. I believe Frank Miller created the Hand. And again, Frank Miller is another guy that's responsible for me becoming a comics fan in the first place. He did Dark Knight Returns. He had that killer run on Daredevil, which we're talking about. Literally, that's what Born Again is based off of. But that's a group heavily tied to Daredevil. And Charlie Cox made a brief cameo as Matt Murdock in No Way Home, and he's returned as Daredevil in the Born Again series. If this movie does indeed take place after Born Again Season 2, we could see the Hand fighting Spidey in prison at Kingpin's command, because Kingpin's probably in prison again, and maybe the Hand's trying to bust him out, or maybe prevent Spider-Man from reaching him. We could see Daredevil fight alongside Spider-Man in this prison fight, or maybe Spidey's trying to break Matt out of prison. It would not surprise me if Matt Murdock is in prison after Born Again. But I think somewhere along the way, we're going to see Daredevil fighting alongside Spidey and possibly even the Hulk as well. So those are my thoughts on the Brand New Day trailer. What do you think? Hit me up in the comments below. This has been Geekville Radio, new and probably unimproved on YouTube, but we're also available all over the podcast space. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, really wherever you can get podcasts. You can search for the show and find all of the shows in our family of podcasts. This is the flagship show, Geekville Radio, with yours truly. We also have Examining the Doctor, about Doctor Who's show commentaries. We have the Lesser Known Geek Hall of Fame, where myself and Crazy Train talk some of the unsung heroes over the years in the world of geekery. And we have Geekville Radio's Nostalgia Trip, which talks about pop culture of yesteryear. So there's a little something for everybody to be had here at Geekville Radio. Again, hit me up in the comments section for YouTube. Click the subscribe button. You can hit that bell to get notified when we're updated. I'm trying to hit doing a couple episodes a week at this rate now. And spread the word if you like what you see or like what you hear. So we're going to be back sooner rather than later. I think the next show we'll do will be on the Darth Maul animated series trailer and my thoughts on that. But until then, I'm going to shut down the power here in the Geekville Radio studios, and we will catch you all in the next episode.